We closed the door because the I don't know where to. So here's the other one. I watched one of these.
Americans seem to love the number 2. There are mostly 2 options in America. There is 1 and 0, yes and no.
That's not it. Sorry. One of these was.
Hello and welcome to the Red Feather Genealogy channel. So we've all seen the silly maps of the country, right? State by state, different regions, what some regions think of other regions, that kind of thing. Sometimes silly, sometimes unflattering, that kind of thing. Well, in a recent video, I used this map, and this map is a spectacular breakdown of the groups of people who've moved essentially east to west historically, broken down county by county in the book American Nations. This book should be absolutely a required reading for anybody getting into American genealogy on any level, even just as a passing interest. There was a book called Albion's Seed, which essentially broke things down to 4 groups of people coming over from Britain over here to colonial America in the early days, but honestly the book was a bit dry. This book is a lot more fun. It gets into more groups of people, explains a lot more detail of how everything from colonial times through to now is entirely irrelevant, especially in elections and demographics and everything that you see in the news today. This book is absolutely spectacular, required reading, and yes, I do happen to have a link to it below. So
Today, a deep dive into the divisions in our country. Don't be fooled into thinking that this can be traced back to the 60s or even the Civil War. The battle lines over everything from guns to civil rights were drawn hundreds of years ago before the country was even founded. In his book, American Nations, Colin Woodard traced the cultural and ethnic histories of Americans in various parts of the country, and he explored how those experiences have come to define the regions they live in today. In order to map the regional cultures, Woodard split North America into 11 separate nations, each with its own values and perspectives. And what he found was that the prevailing attitudes were framed by the original people who settled there, not the ones who live there now. And it's those settlers who were shaped by their own experiences before they even set foot on North America. Take, for example, the issues of guns and violence. The states with the highest rate of deadly assaults are in the Deep South, and Greater Appalachia and the Far West. And yet many of these same states resist stricter gun reform. In fact, in the 7 states dominated by the Deep South, 12 of the 14 senators voted against the background check bill in April. But to figure out why, Woodard looked at the culture of these regions, but not through the lens of modern day politics. Take Appalachia, right over here. These were founded by settlers from war-ravaged areas of Northern Ireland, Northern England, and the Scottish lowlands. Cue Jim Webb here, by the way. Areas well-versed in violence whose people are fiercely committed to individual liberty. People in the Far West were tied to Eastern powers out here who supported their settlements and still fight against outside intervention. The Deep South was shaped by the fight over slavery and creating
You get the idea?
I've seen this article a few times.
Yeah, I've read the book. Very interesting. Obviously talking about the various migrations to the continent. Yes. And they were different people. In fact, some of them had totally opposite points of view. One of the things he points out that the folks that settled like the Massachusetts area, we're planning on using the community to create God's, community on earth. And it was totally the opposite of the southern group that was still an aristocracy and wanted to maintain that, and thought that that was the only way to live. So a totally different, opposite, value systems. And so the idea of this is to look at all these different value systems, and that works its way through the language of the people that speak it. And of course, you grow up in those communities, that's the language you learn. That's the meanings that you get from there. So, and I've seen this so many times. Our state is kind of interesting this way, because we live in a state that's not just one group of people, but we've got the early people that moved up here from outside. Of course, the earliest were already here, right? If you think about, they're still trying to figure out how the original settlers got into this area and so on. No one says that mankind started here. Everyone says it was Kenya somewhere, but in other words, it came from someplace, probably Asia. But there were also boats. They could use boats. There's all kinds of ways that people could have gotten here. But we've got Democrats, from what I understand from my friends. So when they first got here, they're really old, and the state was a liberal Democrat state. But then when they got into oil, all the folks that came here in order to produce the oil and do the oil work came from basically Texas. And so you ended up with the state becoming, now everyone says that this is a red state, but it's a red state with some folks, especially in Anchorage, that are liberal Democrats. So kind of an interesting mix of people here. And so when we look at his map, I don't recall him actually saying anything about Alaska. It was all about the lower 48 and all those people. But we're a mixture. I'll let us take a break, but what I could do is I'll put one of these videos on so that you can watch it. I was hoping for one of the shorter ones.
What we're doing. Let's give Gail a hand.
Divisions that we face, both within the movements we call conservative and progressive, or in many other ways that we can interpret politics. And I do so and wrote the book in the hopes that by understanding these things better, we may be able to move the conversation more productively forward, because we need to understand the problem and define some of the terms and issues that we're arguing about as a nation or as a culture.